What's up, friends? It's the Nerdy Filmmaker here, and today we're going to be starting a little 4-part series about the different phases of production. Over the next 4 videos, I'm going to be going over our process for the 4 different phases of production, right? So that would be development, pre-production, production, and post-production, and what we do in each of those phases. And hopefully that can help clarify your phases as well. So because this is the first video, we're going to be talking about development. The biggest mistake is blurring the lines between development and pre-production. And the way that we see it is that pre-production only happens once you've actually gotten your money, once you know where your money's coming from. So everything that happens before that is development. So what are the things that are happening in the development phase of your indie film? I think the first and most obvious one is your script. In development, you're going to be needing to write your script. And depending on your workflow, you might have things that you create before you start writing your script, right? That might be a treatment or a synopsis. Write your script out as a story first, as like a 2-page story or a 3-page story before you go into writing the whole script. If you want to write down all the beats of your story and just general idea brainstorming, right? So these are all things that you're going to want to do before you start writing your script. If this is your first film or one of your first films, a lot of the times people use things like Word or whatever in order to write their script. I would suggest sooner rather than later switching to a script writing software. So that might be something like Fade In, or if you're really fancy, Final Draft. There's Celtics, I don't really know, or Celtics? I don't really know how it's pronounced. I don't know much about that software. I know some people use it. But there's an industry standard to scripts that not only help other people like your art department and your camera department read it and pull the information they need from it, you can also do production breakdowns. So like it'll list all the locations and how much time is spent in locations and character breakdowns and blah, blah, blah. But it also helps you determine what the actual length of your film is if everything is structured the correct way. Because you know how they say each page is 1 minute? That only works when it's actually formatted in the way that assumption is made. Like if you're using full margins on a document, you're fitting a lot more than what would be in a standard script. But anyway, there you go. So at a certain point, maybe check out some screenwriting software. So now after you have your script and maybe you've gotten a few people to read it and give you advice, gotten some edits out of the way, maybe you've had a table read with some actors reading all the parts so that you can listen to the dialogue and actually see, is this working properly? But make sure you have people that you trust, but who are not just going to say, hey, this is the great script. You want some kind of general constructive feedback from people who are going to be honest with you. So once you've done that, I'm going to assume that you are a writer-director, okay? Otherwise, you'll need to find a director to attach to it. But if you are a writer-director, it means you're also going to need a producer. Now, maybe you are also producing your script. That is entirely possible, but you're going to want a producer. The producer is going to help establish the rest of the team, get some contacts going, pull some favors. They know a lot more also about the finance part of things. And that's kind of the next important part, is to create your budget, your first, rough budget of this project. If you don't know how to do a budget, I have a whole video. It's like a 40-minute video where I create a budget. So you can check out the link for that in the description. There is a template there as well in the description of that video. But anyway, creating a budget, because you need to know how much this thing is going to cost. Now, even if you have no budget, even if you have no money, a project still needs money. At the very least, you need to feed people. You might get to a point where you're renting equipment, and so you need to get quotes. You'll be needing to reach out to rental houses to get quotes. They're super accommodating a lot of the times, especially in down periods for new filmmakers, and you can probably get some sweet percentages off. They want to establish long-lasting relationships with new filmmakers so that eventually when you do get your fancy grant money or public money or private money, then you'll come back to them and pay them the actual rates. So getting quotes from rental houses, getting quotes from for trucks, because if you have equipment, you're probably going to need a truck to transport it around. Also figuring out what are the rates you're going to be paying actors and crew. So are you going to be working under a union contract for ACTRA or SAG, depending on where you are? If you're in a different country altogether, I don't know what your actors' unions are. and what their rates are. So I unfortunately can't speak to that. You would know better than I would. Are you going to be working union with the crew, or are you going to be kind of getting newcomers or people who are just kind of got some time off and love your script and want to help you with it? So figuring out their costs as well, what you can afford. And then finally, when it comes to the money side of things, is where are you actually going to get that money? So planning the financing of this project, which you can really only do accurately or semi-accurately when you have a semi-accurate script. If you're going to be asking people around you for money, let's say you're doing an online campaign like a GoFundMe or something, or you're applying to a grant here in Canada, we have public money that's available to us through arts grants. You need to know what you're asking for, and it needs to make sense. And especially if you're reaching for public money, so government and grant money, you need to be paying people a certain wage. Otherwise, they're not going to give you $50,000 and only 5 of that is going to crew and the rest is going to, your pocket. Where that money coming from, players? Next, something you might want to do in the development phase. And this is also, if you are applying for financing from different places, there's a few key creatives you're probably going to want to have attached to the project already. That's going to be, again, your director. If you are not directing it, you really should have a director attached to your project before you go and speak to any kind of financing body. You really should have a director of photography, at the very least interested in your project and have written like a letter of interest. And the same thing could be said for a production designer and maybe even a composer. And these are people who are going to have really strong impacts on the tone of your film, and will ideally also have past catalogs of work that can showcase how serious they are about their craft. And so if you have a fantastic director of photography attached to your project, and this person has shot, not only like multi-million-dollar commercials, but also has done, short films that have won awards and festivals for best cinematography or something like that, having them attached to your film is going to give your film a sense of legitimacy, a sense that other people who are working in the industry have shown interest in your project. That lends weight to it. So having some of those key creatives, you don't have to go nuts. You don't have to be getting your assistant director and your, set dresser signing letters for you, but really just the team leads, maybe even an editor. If there is a specific actor that is perfect for the role, you're not going to audition. You happen to be friends with, some like Hollywood actor, and they're like, anytime you need me, I'm there. And you've written a script that's perfect for them. And they're like, yeah, put me in the pitch package. Wonderful, right? But these are all people that are going to have a strong impact on the tone and style of your film. And then lastly is, depending on what kind of things you're going to be applying for, you might want to make some kind of pitch package. So that could be like a visual pitch package that has like graphics on it and shows, or like the backgrounds. It's almost like you can use like Google Slides, like a PowerPoint presentation or whatever. And basically you're consolidating all this information into like a really attractive looking, visual package that's more interesting to read, because not only are they getting the information, the synopsis, the character descriptions, your treatment, like how do you want to treat this thing, your bios, something like that, but also the way that you present it is kind of reminiscent of what the project's going to be. So the tone of the pitch package should be the tone of the project. So if you're going to be doing something like a comedy, don't make it super dark and like edgy, but it should have the playfulness or the seriousness or the drama or the bloodiness, if it's a horror, of whatever your project is. So having those other people attached to it, you can be including them in the pitch package, and it's just going to make it look all the stronger. Those are some of the key things you can be doing in development, and these are all things you can be doing before you have money, because as the writer, you are taking the brunt of all of that work, and the director and the producer, potentially you're the producer as well, is taking the work of creating the quotes, creating the budgets, and creating and fetching all the quotes. Quotes don't have to be 100% accurate, but they should at least know generally what things cost so that their budget makes sense, and then you don't ask for $10,000 and it turns out that just that camera alone is going to be half that budget. So those are the things that you're doing before money happens. There's probably tons more you can be doing. These are kind of just general overviews. But the next video is going to be about pre-production. Surprise. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments, like, subscribe, all that jazz. And I'll see you on the next one, friends. Bye. Ow.